Welcome back to Patman Garage. We got another repeat visitor, and this time we got an oil light that is setting low oil pressure light at idle. So we're gonna dig down and find the pressure switch and see what's going on with it. Now, the front diff is in the way on the four-wheel drive version of the truck. Two-wheel drive is much easier because you can just go in through the fender well. But this truck being a FX4 four-wheel drive, our space is much more limited with the front diff in the way. So we'll dive into it and see how it goes. And here's the tools you need to do the job. We got an 8mm drop light. We got an optional 15mm ratcheting wrench. You can do that with a short socket if you prefer. Flathead hammer, short pry bar, 21mm wrench, or 13/16 3/8 ratchet. And then you only need a 15 and a 13mm socket. Again, you don't have to be a deep socket. You could use a short plus an extension if you wanted to. And we need our pressure sensor. Alright, so I started with removing the air box and the intake tube. This one has a aftermarket intake on it, so I'm going to skip those instructions for you guys because they're probably less relevant. We need to pull the belt tensioner off so we can pull the alternator off. So before I get too far down into getting that process done, I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the battery just so we are safe around the power wire on the back of the alternator. And so like I said, I'm going to pull the battery, or disconnect it, and then I'll pull the belt off the front of the engine here. Alright, so down here we have our tensioner, and we need to lift up on the pulley. So I'm going to swing my handle where I've got a little bit more room to work, because once I release the tension of the belt, this is going to need to have more room to come down. We're going to pull this off like that, and then I'll grab the belt with my third hand. Slide the belt off. All right. Belt is removed. You don't have to take it completely out of the truck. We just need it loose enough where we can get the alternator out. But if it makes it easier for you to pull it all the way out, then go ahead and pull it all the way out. I think I'm just going to do something like that and just leave it in there. And then we should be ready to find the, look like 15mm, pull the alternator off. And again, I'm not going to try to disconnect everything there is to disconnect off of it. I just want it out of the way. Okay, there's the alternator with a little bit more light to it. The hose is going to be in the way too, but we'll work around that because I don't want to dig into cooling. Like I said, we got a 15 on top, and I believe the tensioner has to come off to get the bottom one off, if I remember correctly. So we'll start with looking at that, but we'll work on getting the alternator unbolted. I'll give you an update just in a second here. So to the left of the tensioner pulley is the tensioner mounting bolt. It's a 13mm, so we're going to work on removing that, and then the tensioner should come out, and we'll be able to access the bottom of the alternator. Alright, so the hose still blocks our vision or access to a lot of it, but I think we'll be okay. So down here we have one of the mounting bolts for the alternator, the 15. Then we have the other one we looked at already up top. I'm going to go ahead and start with the bottom one, and then we'll do the top one last. Is the sliding lock. Basically that's a captured nut in the alternator, and when you draw the bolt through it, it pulls that collar forward and squeezes the engine side. Now this next step is critical because of that pinch bolt style that I talked about. That insert sleeve is still in the forward position. We need to knock it backwards. So if we put the bolt in the alternator and get it started at a handful of threads, we can give it a tap on the bolt head and it will slide that insert away, which will give us enough room to get it slid onto the block. So from here, I'm going to make sure, give it just a couple taps. Now, you don't want to get crazy because you don't want to crack the alternator, but we're just going to give it a couple taps, see if we can't get it to move a little bit. And then we should be in a better position to get that alternator slid on. Alright, so from up here, I got the alternator removed off to the side, or off to the front I should say. I still have both my big power connector and my trigger wires connected. You kind of can scoot the hose up out of the way a little bit as you go. Alright, sorry about that. So as the alternator is out of the way, you can scoot, or to get the alternator out of the way, you can scoot the hose up a little bit. Now if you look down here, we got our oil filter and then the oil cooler behind that. And then if you follow that where it goes up into the block is going to be where our pressure switch is at. So I'm going to slide the camera down there. I just wanted to get you oriented here. There we go. All right, so at the bottom left of the screen, you can see the oil cooler. And the top right of the screen, you can see our oil pressure switch. So that's what we're after now. And we'll just pull the connector off of it, and then we'll get a wrench around that dude or a socket, and we're almost there. So, it's really hard to see down in there, as you can imagine. So I wanted to kind of let you see what I'm seeing with my own hands here, and we'll get that connector removed and replace the switch here. All right, so it's going to be even harder to show you how to do the connector part here. I just got the connector off, but basically if you see that there's a little bottom square part on the bottom, and just above that is where you need to squeeze. Yeah, basically you get a feel for that flat edge of on the bottom side, and just above it is where you need to squeeze and then pull to release the lock on that connector. And here's our new switch, and SW8368 ordered it from O'Reilly's, and it is a 21 millimeter hex head on there. If you don't have a 21, it's the same size as a 13/16, I believe. So we'll get in there and pop this one off and pop the new one on. So in here I've got my snap-on wrench that is standard length, non-flex head, and you can see right there. So we should have enough room to get this broken loose, and then we'll probably spin it out by hand, hopefully. Alright, I got the sensor off and wanted to point out that the weather grommet seal is still stuck inside this connector. So I'm going to need to extract the little rubber donut there, and then we'll get that put back in the connector in the truck before we reinstall the connector here. Sorry, my camera's not wanting to focus on me here. So that's what we're after here. We'll compare it to the new one. It looks the same, but we'll get the bag opened up and get the grommet moved over. And you definitely want to make sure that that is you don't lose that guy, because that's what keeps water and moisture out of those pins that are connected in the actual, or the sorry, excuse me, only one pin, but that's what keeps the moisture out of that pin, so you don't end up with corrosion or a new problem later down the road. All right, see if I can get you back down in there one more time. All right, we'll see if we can get you down in here one more time. So we got the, where do we go here? All right, we got the new pressure switch installed, and the grommet got transferred over here. See if I can get that rotated. Hopefully you can see that there. So then we're ready to reinstall the connector. So depending on how tight you actually get that dude, the rotation might be slightly different, but we got it connected. So now we can resume putting our alternator back in here. Now we can resume getting our alternator back in position and wiggling that dude back in place. I briefly talked about the pinch style alternator mounting bolt. So if we get down in here and we look at our alternator, you can see that this hex shape here. Now this next step is critical because of that pinch bolt style that I talked about. That insert sleeve is still in the forward position. We need to knock it backwards. So if we put the bolt in the alternator and get it started at a handful of threads, we can give it a tap on the bolt head and it will slide that insert away, which will give us enough room to get it slid onto the block. So from here, I'm going to make sure, give it just a couple taps. Now, you don't want to get crazy because you don't want to crack the alternator, but we're just going to give it a couple taps, see if we can't get it to move a little bit. And then we should be in a better position to get that alternator slid on. So the other thing you can do too is get behind the alternator like this and hold with the pry bar, and that just keeps the alternator from getting thrown into the abyss of the engine bay and gives you something to support when you're tapping with the hammer. So hopefully we got it moved enough where we get the alternator slid back in position here. We'll give this a shot. It's still pretty snug going on. I'm going to pull it back apart and do it one more time here. Alright, we definitely got it moved enough that time. So as you can see, it now just slides in place without any forcing. So now we're ready to line it up and get our bolt started, and then we'll torque everything down here. Alright, so we're getting ready to put the tensioner in. Mind the alignment tab on the bottom side. Make sure that it gets lined up on the timing cover correctly. Otherwise you'll end up with the rotation being off of where it is indexed, and you also might damage your timing cover or tensioner. So pay attention to that going in, and we'll get that installed. Alright, so what I like to do with the tensioner to get it lined up here is get my bolt started like that, and then you can see if I rotate it to the right position, then it falls into that tab. So like that, we're not there, and then it falls in. So it's pretty intuitive. You just need to know what you're looking for and feeling for. And we'll get this bolt run down all the way, and we'll get the belt back on. All right, for the belt, I like to get the crank routed. Ooh, let's see. All right, I like to get the crank routed and around the tensioner and then around the alternator, and then I like to manually put it on the water pump side. There's just more room to move up here than trying to do one of the lower pulleys at the bottom. So we'll pull tension off of the tensioner with one hand on the ratchet, and then our other hand will loop the belt over the top of the water pump. All right, once you get the belt on, I always recommend feeling around the bottom side of all the pulleys. Make sure that the belt is actually secure on the face of the pulley, especially where you can't see. So alternator, want to give a good feel down here, make sure that it's not sitting off to the side of the pulley. And same thing over here on the crank side. We're just going to feel, make sure it's sitting flush in the groove. Water pump, same story. We're just going to go around, make sure all of the pulleys are properly seated on the belt, or the belt properly seated on the pulley. And then we should be ready to put our intake back in here. And after doing the belt, it's always a good idea to visually look at the belt with it running and make sure it didn't do something goofy. And in this case, since we have the oil pressure sensor replaced, we also want to make sure we're not puking any oil anywhere. A little bit of a drip I did while I worked on the truck, but nothing new. So we'll call it good to go here. We'll get it up to operating temperature and make sure that our symptoms are gone. And then start to finish, this whole job took me maybe an hour, including filming time. So I would expect probably about 45 minutes worth of work. Not bad at all. So appreciate you checking out another video of mine. So this is a relatively easy job here, and not my favorite job by any means, but wasn't super involved. But anyways, appreciate you checking out a video. Hopefully you learned something new here, and I will catch you in the next one.